Hi everyone, I am Pratham, Commissioning Editor at Roli Books, and this is Roli Pulse, a new digital initiative. Welcome to a specially curated series, Publishing Perspectives, where we bring together our peers from the publishing ecosystem to facilitate exchange and cross-pollination of ideas. Remember, you can check out all our previous sessions on our YouTube channel, Roli Books, which if you haven't yet subscribed to, please go do so now. You can also find our content on our IGTV, that is on Instagram, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want us to put out more such content, curate more such sessions, then please show us your love. Type in your comments in the comment section below and share this with your peers, your friends, anyone you wish to. This is the final episode of season one of Publishing Perspectives, and this episode is on how to grow readership. The speakers for today are Durba Chattaraj, Manasi Subramaniam, Vikrant Mathur, Rukmini Banerji, and Sayoni Basu. Durba Chattaraj is an anthropologist and writer who teaches at Ashoka University. Manasi Subramaniam is executive editor and head of literary rights at Penguin Press Group at Penguin Random House, India. Vikrant Mathur is director of the Nielsen BookScan, India. Rukmini Banerji is chief executive officer of Pratham Education Foundation. Durba, Manasi, Vikrant, and Rukmini are going to be in conversation with Sayoni Basu. Sayoni Basu has been the co-founder of Duckbill, an imprint of Penguin, where she's currently consultant editor. So welcome to Roli Pulse, all of you. Sayoni, why don't you get us started?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the series Publishing Perspectives by Roli Books. The subject for this discussion this evening is how to grow readership in India, which is obviously a crucial one at the time when possibly readership is diminishing, at least partly because of the times we are living through. I'd first like to ask Vikrant, since Nielsen came to India now many years ago, suddenly all publishers had reliable factual data. So Nielsen and Vikrant have really transformed our lives. So Vikrant, I want to ask you, what trends have you seen in the last few months in buying of books in India?
Sure. I mean, I'll talk about the positivity today. I mean, when there's so much negativity and so much fear outside, let's talk about the positive trends and what's happening in the industry and how industry is coming up with these challenges. When we saw the lockdown where a good amount of period when publishers were not been able to make any sales. Having said that, I want to call out the two data pointers that we have now ready with us. One is obviously since last a decade, we have been tracking the retail sales through the BookScan panel, wherein we collect the data from online, brick and mortar, and all the retailers who supply us the sales data. We aggregate and we publish the report for that. And recently, we have also finished a consumer survey where we have spoken to about 1,000 respondents through the online medium. And we have received a good momentum on that, and we have that information on that. So I'll talk about from both the perspective of these data points so that you understand what the buyers are reading. But before I go to the readers, I also want to say through this conference, webinar, whatever you want to call it, to the people who are listening to these, that the buyers are important, or I would say the readers are truly important, and publishers and the industry need to keep a close to themselves. But at the same time, retailers are equally important, and I will keep them more closer. It's just because of it's very important that today we are facing the challenges, and it's not that only publishers are facing challenges or XYZ is facing challenges. It's everybody is on the same boat. What will happen when the post-pandemic will happen? So these retailers are so critical and important because post-pandemic, you would require them when you start making the retail expansion plans or you want to make a sales growth plans. These are going to play a vital role. So that's why it is very important. And when we did the consumer survey, just to give you a quote on that, the physical bookstore browsing has been said is one of the key drivers for discovering a new book or buying a book. So retails, brick and mortar are equally important for our business going forward. Now coming back to the data pointers, what we have seen in the last few months, that we publish a 750 bestseller chart, which makes about roughly about 40% of the total trade market. And we saw that the Indian authors are more coming up, and people are more reading the Indian content written by the Indian authors. So if I talked about fiction side, roughly about 2/3 of the books being read in this 750 bestseller this comes from the Indian authors. And I'm talking about Amish Tripathi, Chetan Bhagat, Preeti Shenoy kind of authors. And 35 or person is being read by the international, the people like Jeffrey Archer or Paulo Coelho. When we move to the non-fiction, again, the story doesn't change. 2/3 is again coming from the Indian, the people like Sadhguru or Rajita Devkar, Devnath Patnaik. On the international side, you have Robin Sharma, Rhonda Bryan kind of people who are writing it. But when we move to the children's side, it drops to 40-45% of Indian, where Sudha Murthy or Rusky Bonds, Anand Pai comes in. And roughly about 55 to 60% is international authors from J.K. Rowling or Jeff Kinney or Jeremy Stilton. So there's a dearth or there's a need of new authors in the children's space coming out, or need to be more experimental on the Indian side of the business. And when I talked about the genres, fiction side, crime, thriller, adventures, historical, mythological, romance and sagas are topping the charts. While on the non-fiction side, we have seen self-improvement, popular psychology, mind, body, spirits are the best read. On the children's side, children fiction are being read the best. We have also noticed that in the recent phenomenon, and also in the previous, I've said many times that it is the phenomenon that when the web series or the television shows or films being made on the books, we have seen the spike. The people have more curiosity to read, and we have seen in the same time the Secret Games when written by the Vikram Chandra when it was launched, and the second season came out. Then again the books started seeing the spike, and something similar we have seen across. Whether it's a Razi book, which has been written based on the Calling Sehmat and all the stuff, we have seen those. Talking about the recent phenomenon that we have noticed from the consumer survey that we have done, the book readers are reading more, which is a good news for the industry. In average, they were reading about 9 hours per week, which is about 77 minutes per day. It has gone up. Now they are putting additional 7 hours, and they are reading more and more books. And in terms of format, what we have noticed is people have spoken about the different formats being read. People have started saying that because people are not buying, because of that, people might have moved from print side to the digital side or the audio listening side. But when we surveyed and we spoke about the book readers, 1 out of 5 respondents are still reading the print books. And the similar trend that we have seen in male and female, while we have seen slight shift on the female side, on the digital reading side, whether it's e-books or the audiobooks. And interestingly, we have also noticed that the young readers, the people who are below 35 years, are still more keen and interested to read print books. So it's a good news altogether for the people who are printing books, that people are still interested, even in the lockdown situations, are reading more and more print books, and less of has been thought about or talked about on the digital side. The other interesting fact that we have noticed that there's a slight change in the interest habits or interest reading in the children's side. The parents are more keen on buying picture books, activity books, or animal story book for the kids which are 0 to 8. When we talk about 9 to 17, the parents are more buying or interested to more buy the spy, detective, mystery stories or fantasy or classic stories. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is the people are reading more. 2/3 people have said they are reading more from the previous, they have been reading before this pandemic situation. They are more interested to read on the print book side. Slight shift we have noticed on the digital reading. especially on the female and the older age basket, which is more than 35 years. Children, as I said, are reading more on picture books, activity books, and animal books, while the larger other basket of 9 to 17 are reading more mystery book, fantasy, and classic books. In nutshell, we are seeing the healthy sign for the industry, and I think people will come out as we come out from this situation. People will continue reading and reading more and more books as they have been reading in the past.
So how has the recovery been over the last couple of months? I mean, I assume that over March and April, everything was pretty much shut. But
Yeah.
I know that now that, you know, bookshops, some bookshops are open and people can get online deliveries. How is it climbing back to normal levels? Is it better than normal levels?
So we have seen, I mean, a week on week basis, there is a growth is shaping up, which is making the numbers. So week on week basis, we have started looking at 6 to 6.5% growth since May, and we have already hit. So if you look at the January as a base year, we have already reached to 85% of the level of that. So I think we are moving to the normal of which we were there in the pre-pandemic situation.
Okay, that's really heartening.
Yes, it is happening. I mean, the consumer are feeling more confident, and that's why we are looking at that print books is performing, and it is going up and up.
Thank you. Rukmini, of course, Rukmini and Pratham go to places where mainstream publishers do not have the will or balls to go. So Rukmini's market the market Rukmini serves is significantly different from the one which Vikrant is talking about. So Rukmini, how has Pratham readership been affected by the pandemic, and how is there a recovery?
So I'd like to talk a little bit about, you know, your original question about readership, right? And then maybe link it to what you're just asking. You know, as Pratham, we work with a very large number of children directly, and also work with governments. So I deal with a completely non-English population, and also largely rural population. And so before going into, you know, the Pratham readers in this time, I think a couple of points are important. That if you look at the ASER surveys that we do every year and have done for so long, you know, to be a reader, you have to know how to read. So that's kind of a prerequisite. And I'm always very amused that publishers are much more concerned about, you know, many things, but not about encouraging reading to begin with. In the sense that if you look at what is available in different languages, for absolute beginning readers, there's very little. I did an exercise some years ago in Allahabad, which, you know, is a, you know, city with a lot of literary culture and so on. And we had about 10 people. Everybody had 5,000 rupees. And we had 3 days to go and buy every book, not English, because most children can't read English, but every book in Hindi for children, especially for children learning how to read. And many people came back with leftover money. The things that we bought were either alphabet books, you know, Kase Kamal, Merse Machli type of book, or books which had very heavy morals at the end of it. Neither of which, if you were a sensible child, you'd feel like reading. And we really didn't have, we buy for Pratham, we reach about 1 million kids directly. We have actually literally very little to buy because we've bought everything there is in most languages and so on. So number one, our ASER report shows us that even in 8th standard, 25% students in 8th standard are not able to read even a simple story. So there's a lot of work to be done to build reading, but you can't build reading unless you have really, you know, interesting things to read. 2 things that every child in India, even in a remote area, is familiar with, 2 forms. One is textbooks, which again, you know, they're very exciting for the first 1 week, but not after that. In terms of reading material, I mean, you have to read it, that's a different thing. And the second is newspapers. These are the 2 forms of text that are widely familiar forms of text. And so I think also in this discussion about reading, I think the form in which things can be available to you on large scale is important. We ran some very interesting exercises with some newspaper groups, because a newspaper is something that is delivered to everywhere, and how we can build in very basic. And I don't want to bore you with those stories, but it seemed to me that even the newspapers, the group that we were dealing with is one of the large daily Hindi newspapers, had actually not thought about how do you develop reading so that your readers are assured, at a later stage. Now, during the COVID time, of course, since developing reading is a big part of what Pratham does. Pratham Books is a separate entity. They develop a lot of the books and other things. But we've used what we can in a digital form, because also early readers are likely to lapse if they don't have enough things to read. And, we realized quite early on that in the villages where we are connected directly, smartphone access, at least for children, is very low. So, depending only on smartphones is only going to get you to the kids who are probably relatively slightly more advantaged. So we've been doing a lot of things on SMS. And I've been very encouraged that the combination of SMS and radio, many state governments are using radio. We are using a lot of things with a combination of SMS and radio. But obviously there is a constraint on how much you can put in 167 characters. You can do a lot, I've discovered, in 167 characters. But this is a concern. And I think that when we come back, when schools open and when things are back to whatever will be the new normal, taking a look at whether reading levels have fallen or not is going to be a very important thing. The government, as part of their Atmanirbhar 5 days of announcements, the last point on the last day was about a national mission for foundational literacy and numeracy. And I think that is an opportunity to really grow this ability to provide interesting reading at a very, very basic level in regional languages for a lot of people in forms which may be all kinds of forms, hopefully including books. So Sayoni, I've been watching too much TV in this time, and I've developed this habit that from TV, that when people ask you a question, you say whatever you want and don't deal with the question.
Yeah, but it was an exciting story. So, the TRP ratings would really go up. Durba.
Yeah.
I read your article about developing readers, and which was fascinating. But tell me, and I'm not even sure, I'll play a very clumsy devil's advocate. In this time when, there is so much information in so many forms, why bother developing readership? As a children's publisher, I often feel that children are unduly pressured to read, even those who don't particularly want to read, because reading is kind of cool in middle-class circles. So I'm very anti-developing readers in a sense. So why do you think we should develop readers?
So, I wear two hats. I teach writing and I'm also an anthropologist. And as an anthropologist, I kind of know that this is maybe not the best world we can have. We can have many other worlds where we don't sit locked in rooms looking at laptops all day reading books. But I sort of feel like if people are thrown into modernity and modern life, books are one of the great consolations, right? So if you're going to be someone who has to have a 9 to 5 in an office or work in this really stressful, complicated, difficult world, books are one of the places you can go for ideas, for consolation, for hope, for amusement, and in a deeper way maybe than TV or a movie or Netflix. They provide something that those other genres don't. And I think what they provide is a depth. And what I found with students teaching again and again, these are much older students, right, is that there's a hunger for ideas right now, particularly in this generation. Maybe with young people in earlier generations, there wasn't that. But right now, they face so much uncertainty. They really don't know what's coming their way. We don't know what's coming our way. And books are a place to think about the world and think about ideas in, a deep and complicated way. And I think that really, if we're going to be stuck in this world, this life, this modern life, I think this modern life without books is a very impoverished one. So I suppose that's my answer to your devil's advocate question. I would love a world where, we were doing things other than reading and writing and sitting at our laptops all day. But if we are, and if we're forcing more and more people to, then books they're one of the joys, I think, so yeah.
Mansi, the market that you and partly me also we cater to is very much a market where people are sitting in comfortable rooms with the luxury of reading and writing and watching TV. And the one thing that we have seen in the last couple of months is that there has been no dearth of online events which connect readers and writers. Uh, do you think these events are actually developing new readers, or are we uh, preaching to the converted?
So in terms of actually engagement between readers and writers, I think the LitFest formula, which has been in existence for a very long time, has at this point possibly been replaced by the online formula, which you just talked about. And I think it's fair to say that LitFests are certainly areas of congregation for readers, not just with writers, but also between readers. So I certainly go to LitFests to find other readers that I might be able to develop conversations with, and other readers with whom I have shared interests. And I think that is one of the reasons why an engagement forum like a LitFest is terribly, terribly important to our world. In an online version of it, I think social media has kind of replaced that. And another thing I think it's worthwhile to talk about is that I can speak for myself and some of the readers that I know I've talked to about this. Discoverability of books happens more for me through word of mouth than through anything else. I may read a lot of reviews, I may read a lot of book coverage, but a lot of if I go and buy a book, it's probably like 9 times out of 10, it's probably because somebody said, I loved it and I think you'll love it too. And I think word of mouth is a kind of replacement. The replacement for good old-fashioned word of mouth is kind of done through social media. And I think a lot of these online sessions and seminars fulfill that void in a certain way. Does it actually lead to an increase in book buying? I don't know. I think there is a chance it might lead to an increase in book reading, which is a little bit different from book buying. And maybe that's what we really want. Mm-hmm. Also, I also wonder, and I've been wondering this over the last couple of months. I know that the amount of time a person spends reading during the course of the week, Vikrant mentioned that it's gone up from 9 hours to 16 hours per week, which I think is an extraordinary number. And then I wonder if individuals who are reading for 7 extra hours every week, are they buying books in order to read them? Or does everyone, like me, have a shelf of unread books in their house that they're turning to at this time? And then how does that impact our industry? And I think the way it impacts our industry might actually be more positive than just looking at the numbers and saying, oh, actually book sales may not go up because you're reading what you already have. I think it may have a long-term impact of making reading part of your everyday routine, to the extent that when you go back to a kind of normalcy, or what we might define as normalcy, we might then return to the act of reading. I think that's my
that's a good hope
positive way of looking at it.
Thank you. Durba, where do you think new readers lie? And what kind of books do you think would appeal to new readers?
So I think listening to Vikrant's sort of summary in the beginning of the state of the industry was really interesting, because it sort of connected to some hunches I developed over the years of teaching college level students, where the interest in Indian writers has really grown. So students have a lot of questions. They are looking for ideas about what the future holds, about how to be, about what the good life is. And they want these ideas in the Indian context. So that's the gap, I think. So you can read Sapiens, right? But you can't read, Pranay Roy's book was actually a really big kind of development in this kind of area, but you don't have the really great books about the big questions in the Indian context in nonfiction. Or recently, maybe we haven't produced enough of them. So students are really looking for those books. They want to know what the Indian economy will look like 5 years from now in a very concrete way that will allow them to figure out where their jobs lie, right? That's one kind of book they're looking for. But they also want something to read that is fantastic and inspiring and interesting, but in their local context. They don't always want to go to sort of the British boarding school for the Harry Potter. They don't always want to go to, America for the crime fiction, or the UK or Scotland or whatever. They want these really terrific books in the Indian context across languages. And I think there are two groups of readers that the publishing industry should really try and court. The first is science students who don't have reading backgrounds at home, so maybe haven't read from the age of 16 onwards, and then have gone to college, gone to engineering college, gone to, whatever university they've gone to, and then they don't have anything to read when they come out, right? So it's sort of like reintroducing them to the world of reading, but they're filled with questions and they're filled with a desire for ideas. So that's one group. And the second group that I find is students who are new to English, who are kind of entering into first generation college goers, students who are entering into the English language for the first time. They want books in both vernacular and English language, which speak more to their experience, right? So which talk about what it's like to maybe be the first person in your family to go to college, which talk about the experiences that you have, which are very difficult very often in a larger city. And some Netflix shows about these things have become quite popular, and it's almost like we don't have the concomitant books
to an extent. I mean, Chetan Bhagat, Ravinder Singh, Durjoy are...
Yeah, so the one thing I would say is that now, I'm not going to say anything negative about any book or any author, because that's not my place, but I would say that students are looking for something beyond that. So the students that I work with at any rate, engineering students, so non-traditional readers maybe, engineering students of first generation English, these books are not filling that need. They want something else. They want something that's a bit more serious, a bit more in-depth, a bit more moving, a bit more, there's something that they're looking for that they're finding in the non-Indian writers. So sort of, if you're reading Sapiens, you don't have the version of that. What does it mean to be human in the Indian context, right? They don't have the version of that necessarily in India. And so there's some kind of hunger for a type of book that I'm never able to quite find. And so I assign it in a different cultural context or language. Persepolis with first generation English speakers just goes down like a dream. They love Persepolis, right? And so there's something about that book that, brings people to the biggest questions in the deepest way. And I think that maybe that's where there's more to be developed. It's not that there's nothing there, but there's just more that's in that serious realm of deep but excellent books. So they have to be interesting at the same time. And that's where the hunger is. Like, or maybe I need to read more deeply, but I don't see that there's enough in that area to engage these students.
Okay, I have a question for Vikrant, but Manasi is looking a bit distressed.
Yeah.
So would you like to?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to look distressed, but
Okay.
I wonder
feeling marginally distressed. I'm hoping you're going to say what I was distressed
Please.
about.
I wonder if we can tie this back to what I mentioned earlier about discoverability. I suspect that we're not discovering the books that are there as easily as we should be, because for many of the books that you mentioned that you can't find Indian counterparts to, I can think of a few, but I want to add one caveat, which is that I think I can think of them because I am so constantly engaged in the book world. And maybe it's not very easy to discover those books if you're not, reading new, catalogs of new releases week
So
on
then
week
that's
on
your
week, as
job,
I
right?
am doing.
No, I think as publishers, we're doing a rubbish job of getting the information.
We don't know,
Yeah.
and we don't have the time to, all the other things
Yeah.
that we're doing. Like, we need to
Yeah.
know what you're giving us all the time. I mean,
What Vikrant was saying about there not being enough children's fiction and so on in certain genres, I was like, it's there, but clearly, we're not getting the word out.
why are you hiding
Yeah.
these things from us then?
We're not. Somewhere there's a block.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have
Yes.
to also add here that it's also important to consider the role played by gatekeepers outside of publishing in making these books more available, more visible, and not just at bookshelves and in the media, but in every possible way in which your students might hear of a Sapiens or a Persepolis, both of which are books I have read and loved. I wonder why the same readers are not constantly hearing about the books that I'm thinking of, which are from the South Asian context. I won't even say the Indian context, I'll actually say the South Asian context.
Okay, Vikrant, I wanted to ask you, do you see, in terms of the data that you handle, do you see a change in the geographical proportions of book sales in India? I mean, I used to work for a company which did book fairs all over India. And at that point, I was really surprised because 72% of the sales happened outside the 5 metros. Whereas for most publishers, the focus of the marketing, the focus of the distribution is always the metros. So over the years, has this percentage been changing?
It is very hard because we don't dissect the data at the moment by region or by state. But I think looking at the numbers that we are seeing it, that metros are important because they are the people who have the money power, if you can say so. So they are the one who can spend on the money on buying the expensive book. But having said that, non-metros are equally that important, and that's a role any e-commerce would play a part, because they are having a large distribution, and that's how they are reaching to the last miles. And they are not limiting selling the books or shipping the books just to the 4 metropolitan cities. They are reaching out to the non-metro cities or even to the lower tier cities. So I think the book readers are there deep rooted, but the choices of reading is definitely different, as Mansi was just saying. And I was just scrolling my study that we have recently finished. The recommendation coming out from family and friend is always been top of the chart, and that's what been said in the survey itself. And that's a medium that people talk about. So what I'm trying to say, the regional sales are happening in the deep pockets. The choices of the reading is different. It varies. And we have seen in the past that romance is the one of the genre which has been read largely in the South and by the females. South readership is mostly not English. They want to read more on their own languages so that they can connect with their culture. And something similar that we have also noticed in the crime and fiction as well, which Durba was saying, the adoption of the local author and the connect with the local author is increasing. And because of the young population wants to read, which is similar to their culture, which they can relate to, that's the sale is happening in the market. And that's why you are seeing the local or the Indian authors like Chetan Bhagat or Amish Tripathi is always been in the bestseller chart. I hope it answers your question.
Thank you. Since we have limited time, I'm just going to go around the 4 of you and ask you the same question. If you had reasonable, not completely magical powers, in which case, of course, we change the world, what is the one thing that you would like to do, which you feel is logistically possible, to make sure that readership, that there are more and more readers growing in India over the next few years? Rukmini.
I wish we had magical powers. So I think that we have to grow both readers and writers. And those readers and writers have to be close to each other. So you can't write for somebody who's far away from you. I mean, of course you can, but I think it also helps to have people close by. And from where I am sitting, where I see, hundreds and millions of teachers and students, I feel that we have not encouraged in many languages, just simple writing that a lot of teachers can do. They can use it right away. I have been proposing a campaign called, and I'm somehow going to Parliament and putting it into the Right to Education, saying that every child has a right to a story every night. Okay, and so if that's a right, then you have to figure out, how the hell you're going to get it done. And I think if we have children demanding that, then between books, publishers, reading, writing, everything will expand. So if I was the president of India, I would insist that every child in India has access to a different story every night. My own granddaughter doesn't like it if I repeat a story. She says, "Aaj nahi hua tumhara theek se." Okay, so different stories every night for every child in India, 250 million children.
That sounds like a very reasonable and paradoxically achievable target, actually, if one could put it to be. Mansi.
I want to jump onto what Rukmini said. That's what I want to. But if you'll allow me, I'll add a little bit to that, which is another thing I really want to do is to make reading cool and entertaining as opposed to an act. Like, I want to rob it of its moral imperative. I don't think I ever picked up reading because it was the right thing to do, or it made me a better person, or it made me a more empathetic human being. And I think a lot of modern dialogue about reading tends to offer it an altruistic, philosophically moral kind of imperative, which I think makes reading sound a lot duller than it actually is. So my wish is for the act of reading to reclaim its pleasure principle, or to be defined once again, as I think it was at some point in the popular imagination, as more sexy than instructive, more compulsive than compulsory, more narcissistic than charitable.
Maybe we should ban it so that it becomes an illicit pleasure, and then you immediately want to do it. I thoroughly endorse that design. Durba, what would
make reading sexy again? I think that's a great idea, and have a story a night. And I think one of the ways to do that is actually if we could do something like 10,000 really small reading and writing workshops with students across India over a year. It should be doable, with writers, teachers, professors, people who just sort of travel from the big cities to smaller BNC towns to villages, and just do a really enjoyable, fun, delightful reading and writing workshop with maybe 2 books that are just amazing books that you will fall in love with, not because they're charitable, not because they're good for your soul or for your morality or anything like that, but just because they are inherently wonderful. And I think that if we could do that and connect more in that, really, I don't know if these would be online or in person, but I think that just having that very close connection between either writers and readers, but also teachers of writing and teachers of literature or teachers of the social sciences and reading, I think that would be really fun to do. And I think it's doable.
Yeah. So Vikrant.
Yeah, I mean, the three wonderful ladies have spoken, and they have given their full glance of from the publishing industry to what the scope should be for the future in terms of reading. I mean, just to add, what I believe is that it's a time when we are in the pandemic and we have a limited restriction around the movement. People are not moving out, and that's how the government is promoting it. I think this is a time when we can hone our skill sets. The Indian authors need to come out, and if the skill set or the more training need to be imparted, that needs to be given, because there is a need to connect with the audience that they are writing for. And I think those books need to be promoted equally by the industry, by various medium, whether it's a digital medium, or once the opportunity comes out, a physical medium. So the local publisher or local authors need to be more promoted so that their books are more visible and talked about. And I think we need not to force the people. I mean, they can pick it up the book once these books are being recommended by their family and friends. So if one picks up, I think the multiplier action will happen for that book. And at the same time, let the audience to decide which digital medium they want to pick it up. I mean, whether it's a physical copy, or they want to go for a digital copy, or they want to listen. It's a choice of the customer they want to go for. Our investment or our energy is improving the skills. At the same time, writing more and more books for the audience, because audience loves the local culture and loves to have the more and more content coming out from the local Indian authors who understand the local culture. So if those books are being made available and being talked about, I think we are good to go because we are already made the connection with our audience.
Thank you. And thank you all. And I will let you go back to the illicit pleasures of reading, and hopefully you will find someone to tell you a story every night. Thank you for joining us in this discussion. please follow Roli Books on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more updates.